So with my cup of coffee ready, let's turn our attention to the locomotive. It's just night after the big storm R1 I think it's called, and it's quite cold, so I've got my fingerless mittens on. So this is what I have of the locomotive. It's already been, well, it kind of fell apart. This is obviously the base plate here. Got the connected wheels, so that's a rolling road. This is the smoke box door, a couple of screws, and if I look I can see that there are some contact tabs here, here and here. Right, let's take it to bits and see what we have got. I've removed the base plate from the body shell. Inside there's another screw which I think will hold on the weight, so I'm just going to take it out just to verify it and just check. Quite a long screw. Does that allow? Does that allow? Oh yes, the whole weight slides forward. A couple of parts to it. There's this cylindrical bit which I think is already in 3 parts. And this bit here which looks as if it's been machined. Oh right, I wonder what that's all about. Has maybe someone tried to fit a digital decoder and then reversed it. Interesting. Other than that, that's the body shell in decent looking condition. One of the screw holders is broken here. I don't know if you can see that. There it is there, that's broken. So I need to be careful with that. But the steps are all here, 4 sets of them. Nice detail in the cab. And the wire handrails. Painted black, is that right? Okay. Chimney, should there be something on there? We can find out. This is the pickup plates here. Wired there. This to me is kind of heavy wire. I'm not sure if this is original. Anyway, obviously pickups behind the wheels send power to the tender. Examining this pickup assembly, I noticed 2 screws here, and they obviously will shield the contacts and the copper plates inside. So I'm going to take these off and see what lies underneath. So these are the contact arms. These 2 look fairly symmetrical. This one here and this one here slightly out of shape. Would I be right in thinking that this one has been bent? So I'm just going to just put a little bit of straightening into it so that now these 2 arms are pretty symmetrical. Task number 1, deconnect these wires and resolder them with some proper insulation. further investigation has revealed that the wires here fed underneath through these riveted contacts soldered here, so I'm actually just going to remove these two and run 2 leads from here through to the tender without any joins or breaks. Oops! My attempt at repairing this with gluing the ends, I held them in a clamp with a bit of support, but I think the spring effect of the contacts is making it difficult to make a good repair. So fortunately, on eBay I saw this. And it's a Fowler 4F engine by Airfix. It doesn't look pretty, but they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I behold this. This has got a good assembly, albeit that the wheel axles are a bit rusty and they'll probably need cleaning, but the contact plate, the lower part are all complete, all good, so this will help me get my 4F back up and running. So after a bit of a struggle, because these are rusted in, I eventually applied a bit of WD-40 and a bit of pressure, and now I can remove this screw. This one here came out with very little problem, so what I'm going to do is see if I can just take this assembly apart carefully and have a look at what might be lurking in the shadows. Okay, so that's the wheel set. It looks as if it's been sitting in water for a while. Look at how rusty these axle ends are. That's the casing, which is in good nick. Brake shoes are okay. And this is what I'm looking for, the collective plate. That's the wrong one. This is it. This is the collective plate, still not coming out. Get the screw away. I am being very, very tender with this because I do not want any of this to break. There's the mainframe, and here is the collector plate. Complete. Yeah, so I'm going to give this a bit of a clean up, clean the contacts here, and we'll get it fitted into my original chassis, and hopefully that will get the locomotive section of the 4F up and running. So I've dismantled the locomotive that I just got from eBay. When I took the screws out of there, these are the screws here, and in pretty poor condition. Oops, they've been rusted. This one I could use again, but this one I certainly can't. The assembly with the brakes on it, it doesn't look too bad. Compare that to the one I already have, and you can see that there's a brake in this one here. So this one's complete. So I'm going to use this one and discard the original. The mainframe doesn't look in too bad a condition compared to the original. I noticed that the new one has got this additional collector arm, whereas the original doesn't. So I probably discard the original again and keep the new one. This is the body weight that comes out from the locomotive boiler, and if you remember, the original one had been paired in order to provide room for a decoder. I'll keep this one aside in case I want to do that. Wheels. These wheels have been pretty badly rusted. They've also been fitted with, it looks to me like, additional spacers in here compared to the original wheels, which don't have these spacers. Now, if you look at the axle ends, these axle ends are flush with the outside of the wheel. But these axle ends have been sunk in. To me that looks as if these have been added by somebody, perhaps to give a smoother ride. I don't know. One thing is, they are rusty, they are fragile, and they crack. I don't know what material they are. They're certainly not metallic, and they're going to come out. So I'm going to discard this lot and keep the originals. The body shell for the one I just purchased is actually looking in very good condition. It looks very clean. It's got the running number, it's got the handrails, and also something I didn't know about were these handrails at the cab on both sides. Buffer bar is okay, it's got the vacuum pipe. I just need a bit of a clean up. Compared to the original, which have been blackened, and these wire handrails are missing. There's also some additional wire across the buffers. I wonder if that's to provide some kind of coupling facility. So I'm just going to leave this one aside. The collector plate, obviously this is the one, the original is broken, so that's going to go aside. And that means I'm going to use most of the new locomotive, I call it new to me, that I just purchased, and hopefully get this together and have a locomotive, sorry, the Fowler 4F locomotive. Now comes the time when I have to rebuild the wheel set and the coin rods. The difficulty will be in trying to hold these little screws while I'm holding this and the coin rod, and then trying to find, trying to locate this as well. So my solution is I take some nut spinner holding compound, which is blue and tacky. I fit some into the spout. I take the screw and place it in there, push it down till it connects with the nut spinner holding compound, then apply the coin rod to the wheel, and now I can find the screw thread with the spinner and there we are. So I'll just get this tightened up, get the rest of them in, and we'll get the wheel set up, built up. We'd like to point out that two of these driving wheels have got very shallow collectors for the screws, whereas the centre one has got a deeper one because it's got to hold two coin rods. One thing to be careful about, and that is that the coin rod with this section on it should be in the top, and I'm just going to lubricate each of these. You don't need these screws very tight, but tight enough to hold so that the rotation of the coin rods doesn't free them. And then I'm just going to do a quick check around the screws. There, and there, and the last one. And the other thing to check is when you put the pair of coin rods on, that these little pips are all pointing in the same direction. So these are going up, turn it over, and these are also going up. That kind of ensures that at least they're going to quarter together. I do have one further problem to solve, and that is getting the power from the collector plate through the wires to the motor, which is, if you remember, in the tender. So the obvious way would be to run a new length of wire from here all the way long enough to connect into the tender. But that means desoldering at this point here and here. And that isn't a very easy thing to do. This plastic is very sensitive, and I've experimented on this broken piece and made a right mess of it. So I'm going to have to do something which I don't really like doing, but I think it's a necessity, and that is put an extension onto the end of this cable, which by that time will probably be seated inside the tender housing anyway. So I got a couple of pieces of thick black wire. This is relatively thick wire in my opinion, but it will match the original, and the connections I can of course insulate with heat shrink sleeving, and that will allow me to connect to the motor terminals here. Right, let's get this assembled. The contact plate fits into the upper housing, fits over the wheels into the lower housing, and held together by two cell tapper screws which are fitted in there. First of all, take the contact plate and fit it into the cradle for the wheels, so that these frog leg contacts come through the parapet there, making sure they sit nicely. And all you see are the contact arms there and there and there. Come on, there we go, both sides. So while I'm holding this, I then fit the wheels. Now the wheels must go in a certain way. This is the front. On the con rods you'll see this little piece here, that has to go to the rear, and this is the top, so these pips have to go up the way relative to the machine, which is down the way as you're working on it. And these wheels will just sit into the cradles. So a little bit of oil on the end of the axles, and that will work its way in, like so. Now I have to hold that and fit the lower assembly down there. I'm just going to put one of the little screws in to hold it together. See if I can just catch the thread. Not quite. There we go. Because now I can work my way around the wheels and make sure the contacts are behind the wheels. So you very firmly but gently make sure that these contacts sit behind the wheels. This one's okay. And there, and hopefully this is the last one. And quick check that none of the others have come out. And then I can fit the second screw. Reasonably tight, but not very tight, and hopefully this should run smoothly. Just needs to be settled in. But you can see that works. If you get these wheels the wrong way around, they'll jam because they won't quarter very well. I'm nearly at the stage of reassembly, but I want to come back to the problem I mentioned earlier on, which is these leads here. Because these leads have to go out here, they come along the length of the tow bar, they come into the tender through here, they go through a little gap at the front, and then they wind their way through back to here. Now, if I fit these leads through this little location here, let's try and get it done again, put that in there. I think you can see I don't really have a lot of room to work with. That then has to bend under here, and so the joint is going to end up underneath the weight casing. And if I try and put in a couple of pieces of heat shrink, that's going to be too thick to sit into this little gap. So I've come to the conclusion that the only real place to do the extension is here. I'm going to have to cut the cable here and attach the extension leads here and fit the insulated sleeving. Now this is seated into the well of the cab on the locomotive, so I don't think I'll have any trouble with this pressing against anything, and it means I can run these cables through any length I like. Well, here's the moment of truth. I feel as if I'm going to perform a very delicate operation, because once I make the first cut, there's no going back. So, as I say, here goes. And this comes away. I'm also going to take the opportunity to replace this rather heavy looking cable with two finer leads, one for the positive pole, one for the negative pole, and these in fact are DCC Concepts decoder wire. Well, I think I might have gotten away with this. I've managed to connect the leads here. I've checked the fitting with the body shell on top, and to see if it works, I've hooked the end of the wires up to the poles of the motor. So now I'm going to apply power to the wheels. I've got about 6 volts on there, so I'm not sure which way it's going to go yet. It doesn't go that way, but it goes this way. And if I reverse the power, it goes that way. So the tender is working, driven by pickups in the locomotive. We are on our way. I think we're ready now for the grand rebuild. I've got all the parts. We know the locomotive, the tender runs from the pickups, and everything else is reasonably good shape. So let's start. First of all, the bodywork. It fits in through the smoke box door. It slides all the way through. There's a screw hole there. Use the longer of all the screws. Fits in here, and that should now screw into the upper body. If you can get a good screwdriver. The heads in these screws are not very good, but yep, there we are. Sorry, and that's body weight in, and that gives a nice bit of weight for traction. The undercarriage fits in here with 2 screws here, and also at the rear end I need to fit the tender tow bar. Now strangely, I feel the tender tow bar actually comes in 2 pieces, very thin metallic, possibly aluminium, rather than one thicker one. That seems to be quite common with this type of locomotive. Fits in there, held in by these 2 screws. I had to find a replacement screw for the front, because the one I had wasn't quite long enough. This has got just an extra couple of threads, and that should actually hold nicely, which means that the wheels ought to be able to turn reasonably freely. Maybe can't see that very well in camera, but it does work, and I'll just put it onto the track to make sure that it works on the track. Oops. Oops. Yep, and that's running pretty well. The wires from the locomotive are fed into the casing through this little slot. They come from underneath, so I'll do them one at a time. the drawbar will sit in that little gap, and I can adjust the tension of the wires once I get the rest of it done. The wires are fed into the weight, and they will sit in that little channel to allow the weight to nestle onto the tender housing, and this red wire will come up at the back as I look at it. I'm trying to get all these things to line up at the same time, so I need to maneuver this just very slightly, and now I can trim these wires and fit them on to the motor. And let me just turn the assembly around so that you can see how it's come out from the Loco, through the channel, up through into the gap. Right, let's get these wires soldered on. And there we go. So at this stage we ought to have a working locomotive. So let me just turn it upside down. I'm going to apply my power application prod to the wheels of the locomotive, and the tender runs, front pair, centre pair, and the rear pair. So the pickups on all 6 wheels here operate the tender. So we're getting there, definitely getting there. I'm now going to carry out just a very simple track test to see if the tender works from the locomotive on the track, powered from my power supply. And it does. Of course, there's not enough power in this to move the locomotive because there's not enough tension in the drawbar and there's not enough weight to push this. Remember, there's a big weight in here. At this point in the video, I should tell you that I get so excited thinking my 4F was nearly running that I kind of forgot to video a lot of it. So as you can see, it's basically built up, but I've got 1 or 2 problems when I run it on the track. The first thing was that these wheels didn't always engage, and you'd hear them running, rubbing, and I did 2 things. I took this plate off and I reversed it to give more stability for this end axle. The other thing was, with the last 4S chassis I got 2 axles for the tender, so I put those in and lubricated them, and that's running not too bad. But there's a tendency for the tender on the track to skew, and I had a look and I realised that what I've done is when I wired the Loco to the tender, I didn't use this escape here, and I brought it directly out, and what that's done is it's pushing against the drawbar so that the tender has been skewed off the centre line. So I'm going to strip this lot down, rerun the wires through here, underneath, back up there, and I think that should help this drawbar pushing effect. Okay, now it's ready for the rebuild again. I always think it's awkward that you have to have these wires connected before you put this together, because the drawbar is held by the upper case. So that's the way they do it. We've got to live with it. So there's 2 screws that hold the undercarriage to the body shell, shorter one goes to the rear, and there's a slightly longer one goes to the front. Basically, that's it. The wires will come underneath, and they're going to fit. And they're fitted through a tender to there, and then I can draw them in when I'm fitting the rest of the case. Right. You might have heard it, but I'll let you see. Front wheels. It did work. Maybe a lead's come off. Yeah, a lead's come off. Because I moved it around. Just give me a second. And then that goes in there. You can see a tender working with the wheels. Tender's working. And the rear wheels. So all the pickups are working. And I've just got one or two aspects to tend to before I can say the repair is complete. In no particular order, I think the first one would be box store. So that simply clips in like so. Gives a nice appearance on the front. I've got a vacuum pipe to fit onto the rear, so let me just turn this round. And that should sit just in there once I get a good pair of tweezers. Nice. And one other aspect is a set of couplers. I picked these up at the Aberdeen show last year, and I thought, I know they'll come in handy at one point. I think these are called the NEM pocket couplers or something of that nature. And when I look underneath, both coupler housings, where are we? There we go, do have the retaining clips, front and rear. So these, I think, should simply push and click in, and push and click. There we go. Front and rear couplers. Let's get it back on the track and we'll hook it up to a carriage. Well, that's the 4F eventually running round my rather poorly put together test track for double O gauge, but a few wagons pulling away quite nicely, and it does not like the joins on my track, so it doesn't run very evenly, and wheels keep slipping off. They hit the point, the fish plates, or the joints I should say, and keep tripping off. But no matter, it's running. So let's get it back on the bench, we'll do a review, and then we'll put this one to bed. Love it and loathe it, my Fowler 4F is running. It's not the nicest locomotive I've ever had, and I think there are probably a lot of people out there might not like these, but to me it's not the locomotive that counts, it's the challenge of converting something that comes like this into something that looks like this, and I think I've overcome that challenge reasonably well. There are probably a few other things I could do with it to make it better, but I've done quite a lot and I really want to get on with other things. To me, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to go into a box and it's going to be in my shelf for a long time until somebody says, oh, you fancy selling that? And I'll say, yeah. Anyway, let's worry about that when the time comes. At the moment, it's looking nice, a nice body on it. It's working well. I know what's been done to it. Probably needs another wee bit of touch up with paint here and there. But it's got decals on the side. It's got a running number. And hey, it goes when you apply power. See what I mean? And hey, in both directions. What more do you want from a locomotive, people? The box, a bit tatty. I might even try and source another one somewhere. But like I said, it's mine and I'll do it what I wish. Right, so thanks for sharing these two videos with me, people. And hopefully you get something out of it, maybe something you can comment about. I've already had a couple of comments about they must have seen me coming, and you're probably right. Although I would say, although I told you how much I paid for this, there was a couple other little things thrown in, like I got an N-gauge F7 in poor condition, and a Matchbox yellow locomotive in the Super King series, I think it is, Super Fast series. So I'll get a couple of those to do as well. Anyway, looking forward to getting on with other things. This is going to go to bed. I'm going to just say, if you liked it, you might want to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Comment favourably, not too harshly. Come on guys, it's only me. And maybe give me a wee like, a thumbs up. And just keep, enjoy it. Anyway, I'm going to get this finished off, rounded up and sorted out the way. Until we meet again, people, whenever that might be, I want you all to take care of yourselves, look after each other, and enjoy your modelling. It's bye for now.